Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Pinball Arcade. So last time we played Gone Nuts, a table that literally only 10 copies were ever made of. Today we're going to play El Dorado, City of Gold. This is one I recognize the name of, but I'm not sure I've actually ever played it. Certainly, you're having a wide swing here between a table that is just a bunch of squirrels trying to collect nuts and going through an entire adventure through El Dorado. Uh, we've gone up one more year, which really makes me feel like we're going to have a lot of 88s and 89 tables. El Dorado City of Gold, 1984. You mind you might find this gameplay familiar, but not the intricate artwork. This playfield was shared with its predecessors El Dorado and Gold Strike, rethemed as Target Alpha and Solar City, the licensed into international versions of Lucky Strike and Canada Dry. After designing over 200 tables, City of Gold was Ed Krinsky's final table for Gottlieb. 905 units of this table were produced. You see, that puts it in a weird position too, because you kind of know that there never would have been a lot of tables if it's the exact same table with just different artwork. I'm fairly certain we do have. Let's just go back and see. El Dorado, Gold Strike, Target Alpha, uh, Solar City, Canada Dry, Lucky Strike. Like, yeah. 70s era El Dorado here. We do have. And so it obviously would have been very easy to take the table and just reskin the graphics because it's the exact same table. Let's do a table. No pro version, so can't even explore the table if we wanted to. Let's pop out just for a second after looking at this table and see if it really is the exact same lineup as El Dorado, or if maybe this Gottlieb table is different than this one. That's not what I wanted. No, it is. It's the exact same lineup. So, yeah, I imagine that El Dorado City of Gold will play very much exactly the same as El Dorado did. Um, Even if there was slight changes, there's only so much you can actually do, um, other than just change the graphics on it. And it's a real good thing that most pinball developers did not go down this path, because this is a ridiculous thought. Certainly, is to give the exact same gameplay over and over again, even if it had been a decent amount of years since. Uh, you're cutting off your own nose to spite your face, basically, by not introducing nostalgia. And this may be called El Dorado, City of Gold, but the previous El Dorado was just kind of a Western, where this is more of an Aztecian, Middle Central American theme. Let's look at the flyer, since that's pretty much all we can do otherwise. Like, and clearly they weren't trying to hide it, and clearly they wanted to update the graphics, but they probably shouldn't have. They should have just stuck with nostalgia. Um, I think Gottlieb is pretty quickly proving themselves to be the bottom rung of the top 4 or 5 pinball table designers. And shenanigans like this, we have yet to see being done by the likes of Stern, Williams, Bailey, or anybody else. The one thing they could do to at least be somewhat decent about this is they could have flipped it. Like, it wouldn't have taken anything to change the gameplay too much if they simply flipped the entire surface over its axis, and then say the launcher would be on the left side instead of the right, and all the flippers and everything else. You could do that with the wood. You would just have to change the cabinet a little bit, but you could also probably just flip the wood on the front panel so that you would be able to do that. And clearly they updated some technology here, because this one has an LCD screen, and I think we'll go back to the original Eldorado and see that it doesn't have an LCD screen, or if it does, it'll be it would be at least older technology. Now, this particularly kind of sucks, because what this inevitably does means you'll have to play this kind of gameplay twice to get all the wizard goals, which I'm not sure I appreciate that thought. All the sound effects are different, and that would just be changing the circuitry inside. Particularly at this time, it still would have been non-trivial to change the circuitry inside a pinball table. And as far as I know, there was never a situation like within bookstores and comic book shops where you could return unsold or old pinball tables. So it's not like there would have been a whole bunch of Eldorado original tables sitting around that Gottlieb had a need to refresh. No, they just chose to be lazy and not design new tables. And again, just if this was a mirror reflection of Eldorado, that would have been something. At the very least, it would make sense then to put the original Eldorado table next to the City of Gold table, or any of those other variations of the table. But if you had every single variation of these tables right next to each other, it would be so blatantly obvious that they were the same table. And I think it would be fairly blatantly obvious in most cases to pinball fans that it was the same table anyways. There would have been at least one fan group, newsletter. They didn't add any lane selection feature. They didn't add any ball saver feature. They didn't add any kickbacks. I don't know if there's a single component that's new or even changed. I mean, it's different colors, sure. But as far as the playfield, it's all the same. And maybe I would want to cut him some slack if I knew for a fact that Gottlieb was a new company and this was them re-releasing Eldorado because it was very successful and it had a new and they just needed to make some money to stay in business, which probably even in the 80s there were some pinball companies like that. But man, is this hard to Light to hold bonus or an extra ball, score at least 1,000,000 points. Well, we'll have to play El Dorado to see if the sound effects sound any better. We've kind of ironically seen probably the beginning of the end of a generation of pinball in general, because you have Gone Nuts, a table that was canceled and never released, and then we have a decision here that feels incredibly money-grubbing and corporate, back to back. Also have to wonder what bundle did this game come in? Did it come with El Dorado, or did it come with a different bundle? Just to pad out development. And at a certain point, why not just give us all the skins instead of just 2 of the skins? In the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a pinball table that was created that just had a monitor in the back. And so the table itself also didn't play any different, but you could load in different themes of games. And even then they thought that was going to work, and it didn't. Because the table just plays the same. And it's not like ramps or standing targets or any ball locks were magically moving. So there was always a central ramp, there was always a drop down target. Plus with the screen, it just was in a position where it was kind of constantly trying to be more of a video game than a pinball game. Central Peg saved me there. Wow, I didn't realize the top lanes there could be missed. You seem to be spelling something at the top, but not spelling it by hitting the drop-down targets. Which that seems weird, because that almost implies I have to hit all the drop-down targets up there multiple times. Let's go back to El Dorado then and see how this plays in difference to that. No music and very wood style sound effects. So sure, you could have just changed the audio. Why make new art? Is the art here too simplistic for 83? Apparently they thought so. This definitely feels to me like a better way to play this table, frankly, is less noise, less distraction, less visual distraction on the table. Yeah, I would, of the 2 tables, I would gladly pick this. We can see that it is a 5-digit reel, counting the score, not an LCD screen. So they slightly modernized it. Maybe there's an argument for maintenance that the reels for the score taking were breaking down as much as anything else, so replacing the circuitry and all was a good way to modernize the same table without having to completely get rid of components. You can see how the bulbs are brighter, and this is older older technology. This is just not good enough of a table, though, to justify it. You can even hear in this old one the humming of the capacitors on the flippers, or the circuitry on the flippers. I don't know if they're capacitors or not. Apparently there's a rollover that I didn't even realize existed in the center there. Just totally not a good enough table, though, to potentially ask people to play multiple times. Unless Pinball Arcade was going to give us several hundred more tables, and they just probably never had a chance that they were actually going to do that. At a certain point, this whole project, and see, this is 5 balls. I wonder, we'll have to double check to see if by default it's 5 balls. This does kind of feel like a Pinball Arcade feels like a project that that probably would have lost a lot of momentum as soon as all the programmer's favorite tables had been emulated. It would be harder and harder every day to wake up and work on lower and lower quality tables. It's also kind of hard to have passion for a project where you have to potentially emulate or program hundreds, if not thousands of tables that you have no interest in. So there is definitely a balance between your motivating factors there and keeping spirits high. And clearly Pinball Arcade and FarSight Studios lost all momentum when they lost the licenses. They didn't have a backup plan, and they seemed to have just been emotionally crushed by it. So despite the visuals, it seems to me the only actual difference between Eldorado and Eldorado City of Gold is that you play with 3 balls. And if you wanted to play with 5 balls on this artwork, this very busy artwork in comparison to Eldorado, you just can't do it. Because I don't think there's a pro mode on this table. And this is definitely just one of those tables where there's not a lot to do. Yeah, game setup doesn't let you do anything, and there's no pro version. So this is a worse experience even than Eldorado. I guess that also kind of highlights that at least in the 80s they were pinball was gaining in popularity, and arcades were getting greedier, and so they weren't willing to let people play 5-ball games anymore by default. But you kind of have a situation where that gets bounced back in the other direction eventually, because we start to see a lot of tables that have lots of easy ways to get extra balls. And because there are lots of ways to get extra balls, or lots of ways to get multi-ball, it balances it. It becomes a scenario where if you're a good pinball player, you can still keep on playing fairly easily on 3 balls. But if you have an unlucky run, or if you're a bad player or a kid, then you don't have a scenario where somebody walks away from the pinball table and there's still a ball to be played or two, which that was a thing that would happen. I don't know if it ever was particularly that terrible of a thing, though. Eventually the electronic pinball tables would just straight up recognize that somebody has walked away and hasn't played in 5 minutes, and it would shoot the balls automatically and allow them to drain out, to reset back to attract mode, and you have to pay mode. But a lot of pinball tables didn't even bother to have features like that, and if you were a poor kid in an arcade, you could just walk around and see if somebody has left you half a game to play. There were definitely kids at the arcade, as I often would hang out at the arcade, that were just broke. Like, parents would not give them any kind of quarters or money, nor would they give them any chores that would allow them to earn any money. So unless they figured out some scheme or turned to a life of pickpocketing, that they were just desperately wandering around watching the attract screens and looking for quarters that might be in the coin return slots, or seeing if they could bum a game off somebody. There's one way to earn an extra ball, and one way to earn a special. The first time the bank of the upper drop targets is completed, it likes to hold bonus when lit. Completing the bank of the upper drop targets lights the upper drop targets and roll over for a special, and the bank lower targets for an extra ball. Once the lower targets are lit for an extra ball, shoot the lit lower drop target to earn it. Once the special is lit, shoot the lit upper drop target and complete the lit rollover. Only one extra ball or special can be earned in per ball in play. Whether it's earned or not, they can be relit by completing the upper bank drop targets again. Okay. So, and that's another example of the Pinball Arcade being kind of glitchy, in that it highlights something I did in the previous game when I started that game. Okay. So I don't think I'm misunderstanding this, and you have to hit each of the glowing letters in order, because that would mean I would have to basically sweep all the drop targets from the left to the right in that order to get an extra ball, and that is frankly asking too much. Nor do I think that means I need to actually hit all the drop targets a massive amount of time. If I understand it right, to get the extra ball, well, all I need to do is hit all of these drop targets once, and the blinking green lights then on the drop targets on the right all the way through, which that's much more reasonable. this is one of those tables where you really should be nudging a lot more. Unfortunately, I just really have no excuse to go long on this episode. I could easily end the episode after this game, and because it's just the table we've already seen. The audio's been improved, the visuals I think have not been improved. The scoring has been multiplied by 10 effectively, and that's it. The number of balls has been disimproved, made worse. Because there's only 3. This really just makes me feel like Gottlieb is cheap and lazy. And yeah, they could have at least had the decency to flip the table. Which I suppose I could probably, through visual effects, flip the table myself and make a modification like that. If I had a real-world version of this table, it probably would take some permanent modification to flip the table, and the art would probably be non-existent at that point. But yeah, if you were just playing on the underside, yeah, you probably couldn't, after the fact, do that. You can, in production, do that, because I imagine there's a bunch of screw holes and bolting reliefs to hold down bumpers and flippers and other components. So I don't think you would have a smooth, polished backside of a playfield. But they definitely could have had the... Gottlieb could have pulled that off easily. This table's full of things that just blink. They don't, like, fill towards anything. Which I find that kind of frustrating. Because it doesn't feel like you're really making any momentum. And it's not like you're getting even a lot of sound effects when you score. 8 drop-down targets in the back with 5 more on the side gives you 13 drop-down targets, which is, I suppose, below the 15 drop-down targets that you would have in some of the billiard theme ones. But they also kind of spread those out. And Hotshot, for instance, had very wide and round standing targets, not square, small drop-down targets. So those were easier to target anyways. Plus they were the only real focus of Hotshot anyways, so they were easier that way. I think they also are just closer to the central part of the table, not way at the back. And I have no idea what you do to get half of these lights to even light up. Yeah, the right lane, for instance. I have no idea what makes that right middle lane light up. The in lanes, the out lanes, I have no idea what causes them to line up. It looks like there might be a sync ball in the top left there, but I bet there isn't. I don't think there's any sinkholes on this table. There's no multi-ball from the looks of it, and no spinners, no ramps, nothing that might have drastically changed the gameplay. You could have added a couple of ramps and still used the same design. At least if you had made some kind of change to the table design, you could have said, well, the creators come back and made some tweaks that he felt make the game better. Yeah, there is just literally no reason whatsoever to ever want to play Eldorado City of Gold. Well, the good news is we've got Space Shuttle next. But yeah, if we were to compare this to Big Shot, which I don't think we can go into pro mode and look at. Like, Big Shot does have 15 square targets, but they're angled much better, and they are closer to the center table. I think the shot, you can kind of tell, is for this table a lot easier. This is one of these early first generation tables where the plunger doesn't work. All you're doing in this table is trying to hit each of the stars and stripes. And it's so much a shorter journey with nothing in the way. The visuals on the table, honestly, I prefer the simplistic visuals. And honestly, this is pushing it. It is kind of ridiculous that there are 15 drop-down targets in this table. Although, in all fairness, this table also has a sinkhole, which Eldorado didn't, and it has a outlane recovery if you're lucky on the right side. There's only one bumper on this table, and yet it's placed in kind of the perfect position. It really is an argument for less is more. If your focus was just going to be spell Eldorado, I guess they were lucky that Eldorado City of Gold was the right number of letters. Otherwise, they would have had to think of something else. But yeah, look here at just how easy it has been for me to play this table in comparison. I literally just locked all but one of the drop-down targets. Plus, you have 5 balls. Yeah, this isn't the table that we were focusing in on today, but it does say quite a bit that I'm more interested in going back and playing this table and practicing actual shots and actually knowing what I'm aiming for than playing Eldorado or Eldorado City of Gold. Yeah. So we've kind of had a couple of like uninteresting tables, a couple bad tables. Firepower 2 in comparison is not terrible. Haunted House is not terrible. It's just not my style. The good news is I'm fairly certain Space Shuttle is a great table. And if we are up to 83 at this point, then I guess we'll probably be about 86 at this point, and then 89 at this point. So looking here, there Space Shuttle looks like it's a good table that I recognize. Pinbot, obviously, I recognize. Taxi, I recognize. Elvira, I recognize. So there's a lot of opportunity still for some surprise successes, but also I think we are running about 50-50 here, where some tables are okay, not great. You are particularly in a weird position with City of Gold, though. Like, that really feels like a table that they shouldn't have bothered to make or release. If we are going from the idea that the ones that don't have Pro Mode are the ones that were version 1 of the Pinball Arcade emulation software, then it does imply to me that they got better and released El Dorado, the original, after the fact. But that didn't go back retroactively and fix City of Gold, which definitely feels like it should at least have the table exploration and the ball control mode. At the very least, all the tables should. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.